Two ancient tombs dating back 2,000 years have been unearthed. Tomb No. 1 is filled with traps and hidden mechanisms, but the higher status Tomb No. 2 has surprised everyone even more. Coming soon on Exploration and Discovery, episode 108 of Archaeological Discoveries of the Century. One winter night in 2000, a sudden explosion shattered the quiet of a small village perched on a high loess plateau in the northern suburbs of Baoji, Shaanxi Province. The blast echoed across the fields on the slope, startling the entire area. It was so loud around 4 in the morning, a villager recalled. Many residents, including Zhang Xiaoming, were jolted awake by the noise and tremors, but in the darkness, no one dared step outside to investigate. At first light, Zhang Xiaoming followed the direction of the sound and soon discovered the source of the explosion beside a mound. Zhang Xiaoming, born in the 1950s, grew up knowing that a large ancient tomb stood beside his village, so much so that the village itself became known as Cemetery Village. In earlier decades, the area around the tomb remained quiet, but starting in the 1990s, unfamiliar figures began appearing near the site. Villagers occasionally discovered new holes dug into the burial mound, clear signs of tomb raiding attempts. Fortunately, cultural relics experts later confirmed that the thick layers of sealing soil had prevented these robbery tunnels from reaching the actual tomb chamber. Even so, the sudden explosion left everyone with a renewed sense of danger. The cultural relics authorities realized that the tomb was now in a highly vulnerable state. Baoji, the second largest city in Shaanxi Province, stretches along a narrow corridor carved by the Weih River from west to east. The city has a long and storied history. Over 5,000 years ago, Emperor Yan, one of the legendary ancestors of Chinese civilization, is said to have been born in the Qingjiang River basin in Baoji. More than 3,200 years ago, in the 11th century BC, the early Zhou people established their state in Zhaoyuan, at the foot of Qishan Mountain in Baoji. By 770 BC, after escorting King Ping of Zhou eastward during the transition from the Western Zhou to the Eastern Zhou dynasty, Qin Xianggong was formally infected and founded the state of Qin, its capital located in what is now Baoji. Because of its historical importance, Baoji has yielded numerous valuable archaeological finds in recent decades, especially exquisite bronzes, earning it the nickname the hometown of bronzes. The steep loess plateau rising beside the city is known locally as the North Plain. Cultural relics experts had already gathered substantial information about the small settlement called Cemetery Village on the North Plain and the ancient tomb beside it. Several theories exist regarding the origin of the village's name. Many of them relate to a nearby area known as Jinling Slope. Some locals believe the name may be linked to the Jin people, who once occupied the area and may have built a mausoleum atop an earlier burial ground. The Jin dynasty was a northern regime founded by the Jurchen people, lasting only about 120 years. Why would the Jin people construct a mausoleum on the North Plain, and who exactly lies buried within it? Solving this mystery would undoubtedly add a new chapter to Baoji's rich history. In 1982, Baoji City launched a comprehensive cultural relics survey. During the cultural relics census, archaeologists conducted a detailed survey of this high plateau. Its remote, open setting and its alignment with traditional Chinese geomancy made them believe it could conceal a major ancient tomb. Sure enough, guided by local villagers, they quickly identified a promising site in Cemetery Village. It was a mound, roughly 30 to 50 meters in diameter and about 3 meters high, with a landslide-shaped top. Everything about it indicated that it was the burial mound of a large, ancient tomb. From the villagers' accounts, the researchers learned that only a few decades earlier, stone figures and stone horses still stood in front of the tomb. Back after liberation, one villager recalled, "Our first and second production teams farmed this land. If the mound was in the first team's fields, the stone man and stone horse were in the second team's fields. The stone man and stone horse were partially exposed above the soil. When we were kids," another villager said, "we used to cut grass for livestock here, and we'd pretend to ride the stone horses." These stone men and stone horses were actually stone statues known historically as Wengzhong. Originally, such stone statues, figures, and beasts were placed only before the tombs of emperors, symbolizing imperial guards and ceremonial honor. Over time, their use expanded, but strict rules still applied. According to the Ming Huidian, the administrative code of the Ming dynasty, dukes, marquises, and first and second rank officials were entitled to a pair each of stone pillars, stone tigers, stone sheep, stone horses, and stone figures. Third rank officials were allowed one fewer pair of stone figures. Fourth rank officials were permitted one pair each of stone pillars, stone horses, and stone tigers. Fifth rank officials were allowed one pair each of stone pillars, stone horses, and stone sheep. Officials below the sixth rank were not permitted to erect stone statues at all. Based on these rules, a tomb featuring stone figures must have belonged to at least a first or second rank official. This raised the question, could the Cemetery Village tomb belong to an important figure from the Jin dynasty? Villagers also told researchers that before 1937, a stone stele stood at the tomb, clearly inscribed with the tomb owner's name. The inscription read, "King Shen of the Tang, Li Meizhen," with the reverse side recording details of his life. Because of this, locals long referred to it as the tomb of King Shen. So who exactly was this King Shen of the Tang, Li Meizhen? Historical records reveal that Li Meizhen, originally named Song Wentong, was a powerful regional warlord in the late Tang dynasty. Beginning his career as an ordinary soldier, Song Wentong fought across the land during the turbulent final years of the Tang. Later, for his role in suppressing the Huangchao rebellion and escorting Emperor Zizong of the Tang dynasty, Song Wentong was granted the name Li Meizhen. He eventually rose to the position of military governor of Fengxiang and Longyu, and for a time was even titled King of Che. During the Five Dynasties period following the fall of the Tang, the emperor of the later Tang further honored him with the title King of Qin. Therefore, on the villager's old tombstone, the Tang and Tongqin King Li Meizhen should refer to the later Tang dynasty. The 1980 Cultural Relics Census ultimately confirmed that the so-called Jin people's tomb was a misunderstanding caused by a place name. To date, no tombs belonging to the Jin dynasty have been found in the area. Although the original tombstone bearing Li Meizhen's name had long disappeared, the villagers' consistent descriptions convinced researchers to tentatively identify the site as Li Meizhen's tomb and erect a new marker. With that, Cemetery Village returned to its former quiet. But 10 years later, that peace was broken when the tomb was robbed. The local government realized that formal protective measures were urgently needed. They consulted with both the municipal and provincial cultural relics bureaus. The agreed plan was to conduct a full archaeological survey first, evaluate the findings, and then decide on further action. The next step, if necessary, would be excavation. After receiving approval, the Baoji Institute of Archaeology assembled a specialized excavation team. In early April 2001, team leader Liu Junch led the group to the tomb site. There, they found 3 rectangular robber tunnels. Each was more than a meter long and about 70 to 80 centimeters wide. The archaeological team soon began a detailed investigation of the damaged tomb. Their findings were astonishing. The tomb measured roughly 45 meters north to south and 22 meters east to west, nearly 1,000 square meters in total. Beneath the mound, the backfilled soil layer reached a depth of more than 20 meters. During the survey, Village Secretary Zhang Zuming offered an important clue. He said there had once been another tomb to the west of the main one. It had been leveled during land flattening work in the 1970s and was no longer visible. If the site indeed contained a primary tomb and a secondary tomb, it might indicate a joint burial of husband and wife, making the discovery even more significant. After drilling around Li Meozhen's tomb, archaeologists confirmed that another tomb did exist just in front of the expanded drilling area. Further exploration revealed that this newly identified tomb measured 32 meters north to south and 16 meters east to west, about 510 square meters, much smaller than the main tomb. Drilling results made the layout clear. The eastern tomb was the larger one, and the western tomb was smaller. Second, both tombs appear to be masonry structures, and many of their finer details cannot be determined through drilling alone. Because there is still no direct evidence, the archaeological team has not been able to confirm that the tomb owners were Li Meozhen and his wife. A definitive conclusion simply cannot be made. For example, which of the 2 tombs was built first? Which one was later, and who exactly each tomb belonged to? None of these questions can be answered yet. Ultimately, researchers designated the smaller tomb as Tomb No. 1 and the larger, primary tomb as Tomb No. 2. Why was the western tomb labeled No. 1? Because it was excavated first. The team initially assumed it was the smaller and therefore simpler tomb. From my perspective, one archaeologist said, "I had never excavated a tomb of such enormous size. Tomb No. 2 turned out to be a masonry tomb with a sloping passageway." Most ancient remains found beneath Baoji date to the pre-Qin period, when tombs were typically simple pit burials far less complex than the tomb group now before them. After gathering enough information, Liu Junch decided to start with the easier one, using the excavation of Tomb No. 1 to gain experience before tackling Tomb No. 2. Moreover, because the sealing soil of Tomb No. 1 had eroded early and attracted little attention, it was likely to be relatively well preserved. On April 9, 2001, the excavation of Tomb No. 1 in Lingyuan village officially began, with the Baoji Institute of Archaeology committing its full resources from the outset. Nearly all professional staff, including technicians, were present at the site. Only a few team members were assigned to another archaeological project in Shishan, Baoji, conducted jointly with the Provincial Institute. Everyone else remained at the tomb. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoming organized villagers from Cemetery Village to join the excavation effort. The entire construction workforce came from the village's own construction teams. In total, 2 teams more than 200 villagers worked alongside the archaeologists. At that moment, Even ordinary villagers poured their full enthusiasm into the excavation. "We were thrilled," one villager recalled. Many believed that once the tomb was excavated, tourism could flourish and bring real economic benefits to the village. "Everyone was genuinely excited," another villager said. People felt that such a massive tomb, once revealed, would be unlike anything they had ever seen. Although the team had no prior experience excavating masonry tombs, they quickly adapted to the task. Typically, the procedure for such excavations is to clear the tomb passage first, follow it inward, and then enter the main chamber. Our excavation followed the same principle as always. Begin by uncovering the tomb passage. Using the data gathered during the preliminary survey, the archaeological team quickly located the boundaries of the tomb passage on both sides. Digging downward within this area, the south-facing entrance gradually appeared, revealing a sloping passage descending from the surface. No steps were found in Tomb No. One, its passageway was entirely sloped. The walls on both sides of the passage were neatly constructed and fairly uniform. As excavation continued, the passage of Tomb No. 1 slowly revealed itself. It was simple in design, but unusually long and deep. During the first few days, the work was repetitive, and the team expected it would take many more days before reaching the burial chamber at the end of the passage. But just 1 week later, on April 16th, while workers were clearing soil at a depth of 7 meters, traces of ancient architecture suddenly appeared in the earth beside the passage near where the chamber should be. Could they have already reached the tomb? According to the survey, the chamber should lie 13 meters underground, yet they were only at 7. Had the survey been wrong? Excavation of Tomb No. 1 had officially begun on April 9, 2001. Yet only a week later, on April 16th, ancient architectural remains unexpectedly emerged from the soil near the burial chamber area. Soon afterward, a brick-shaped structure more than 3 meters wide gradually came into view. The archaeological team had never encountered such an intricate and refined architectural style in a tomb before. The green brick eaves, over 3 meters wide, suggested that an even more elaborate structure lay beneath. How could such a building exist underground? Could it be part of the main tomb complex? As the team carefully cleared the mysterious structure, they uncovered a set of decorative brick carvings beneath the eaves.
2个侧面有这个家伙石油这个托。
In Chinese tradition, the crane is an auspicious spirit bird symbolizing longevity. In ancient paintings and calligraphy, cranes often appear alongside immortals. This is why the phrase "riding a crane" to the west became a poetic metaphor for departing the mortal world and ascending to the realm of immortals. However, the 2 brick carvings unearthed from Tomb No. 1 were clearly different from the usual immortal riding a crane imagery. One carving depicted a woman wearing a flowing white, wide-sleeved gown, a cloth sash tied across her chest, a floral crown on her head, with a gentle, benevolent expression and a full, graceful figure. Holding a long scepter, she kneels with reverence on the back of a phoenix, its wings spread wide as it soars upward. A crane hovers above, while immortals and cranes lead the way ahead, the entire scene resembling a celestial realm set against swirling auspicious clouds. Because the figure in the relief is riding a phoenix, these 2 brick carvings have come to be known collectively as the riding the phoenix and riding the crane to the west motif. These 2 exquisite brick carvings became the archaeological team's first major discovery. Researchers soon noticed that the woman's clothing clearly reflected typical Tang Dynasty fashion, matching the era in which Li Meozhen lived and supporting earlier speculation about the tomb owner's identity. The fact that the carving depicts a woman also suggests that the tomb's occupant was female, aligning with previous assumptions. With two adjacent tombs, Tomb No, 2 as the main burial and Tomb No, 1 as the accompanying tomb, the layout strongly indicates a husband and wife burial complex. But why does the carving include the detail of riding a phoenix, a symbol of ascending to the immortal realm? This leads us into the period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. In fact, some historians argue the era should be called the 5 dynasties and 11 kingdoms, counting Li Meozhen's Qin state as an additional regime. Having long held the title of King of Qin and controlling the military and political power of Fengxiang, Li Meozhen had effectively established an independent state. Therefore, according to Zhang Wubao, a scholar of Sui Tong history, this phoenix riding detail further supports the idea that Tomb No, 1 belonged to Li Meozhen's wife. At the height of his power, Li Meozhen ruled western Shaanxi, eastern Gansu, northern Sichuan, and southern Ningxia. His territory was actually larger than that of many small kingdoms during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. Although he never proclaimed himself emperor, he established a full bureaucracy, and his wife was addressed as queen. In life, Li Meozhen's wife not only held the status of a queen in practice, but had already assumed the title in all but name. If this tomb truly belonged to her, the underground masonry palace would likely contain national treasures and invaluable historical information from that era. After uncovering the brick carvings, the team continued their work with growing excitement. As more architectural elements emerged, the structure began to resemble a miniature model of a multi-story palace. At the topmost level beneath the eaves, 3 central halls could be seen, with 2 diagonal wings extending outward on either side. What surprised the team most was that the brick-carved doors on both wings were half open, each revealing a woman peering out. One figure appears to be welcoming guests, while the other seems to be bidding them farewell. The second tier of this miniature building features an intricate pavilion with railings. Below that lies a sloping roof, its rows of tube tiles clearly visible. By this point, the archaeological team realized they had uncovered an extremely rare ancient tomb structure known as a Duanmen. The exposed portion alone measured to 0.5 meters high. The closest known parallel is the tomb of Feng Hui in Bin County, dating to roughly the same era, which also contains a Duanmen. Earlier still, in the 1950s, a Song Dynasty tomb known as the Beixia tomb in Henan was found to contain a similar structure. Historically, Duanmen referred to the south gate of the Jade Emperor's palace, and many imperial cities in ancient China adopted the same name for their southern gates. For example, both Sui Tong Luoyang and the Mingqing Forbidden City in Beijing had a Duanmen. Because the ancients believed that death mirrors life, architectural forms from the living world were often recreated underground, usually in symbolic form. This tradition reflects the Chinese belief that death is like life. Tombs were therefore designed to resemble the courtyards people lived in during their lifetimes. They included front halls, back chambers, living spaces, and the Duanmen served as the equivalent of the main gate to one's home. Unlike the stone doors typically installed at the entrance of tomb passages, the Grand Duanmen of Tomb No 1 was built entirely of green bricks. Most striking of all, the brick-carved wooden structure above the gate rises tier by tier, each layer receding slightly, almost as if rendered with Western-style perspective. The vivid human figures, the intricate pavilion railings, the elegant eaves, and the refined brick-carved motifs, along with the cinnabar-coated brick columns flanking the gate, rising step by step, all reveal extraordinary architectural imagination and craftsmanship. So, does the presence of adornment symbolizing the south heavenly gate at the end of tomb no? One's passage imply a royal or near royal status for the tomb's occupant. In the Beishas Sanctum excavated in 1951, the occupant was identified as Zhao Dong, who lived in the late Northern Song period, though his exact identity and rank remain uncertain. The tomb of Feng Hui, excavated in Bin County in 1992, belonged to a late Tang and 5 dynasties warlord who commanded the Shuofeng army, holding a status comparable to that of Li Miaozhen. When the eaves of the end gate were uncovered, the excavation had already reached a depth of 7 meters below the surface. As more of the end gate emerged, the tomb passage grew deeper and its slope steeper. At first, when the incline was gentle, workers could haul soil up with a small tractor, but as they neared the tomb entrance, the slope became so steep that the tractor could no longer climb on its own. In the midst of this difficult excavation, an accident occurred. At the spot where a wooden door should have been, on the west side of the passage, the earth suddenly collapsed just 10 minutes after the operator had stepped away. Fortunately, the collapse happened after everyone had left the area. The Loess Plateau is famously firm, stable enough for people to carve caves and live in, but this time the Loess played a trick on the archaeological team, serving as a stark reminder of how critical safety is. I heard the news the next day. One team member recalled, "I rushed over to check and thankfully no one was hurt." After seeing the collapse, the team immediately began reinforcing the passage. But reinforcement required wooden supports, and once too many were installed, moving soil up and down the passage became difficult. Initially, they believed the structure was stable enough and did not reinforce it heavily. But after the west side collapsed, they realized stronger, denser reinforcement was necessary. By May 4, 2001, nearly a month of clearing the tomb passage was finally coming to an end. The next step was to locate the tomb door leading into the underground palace, which lay 15 meters below ground. But once again, Tomb No. 1 delivered an unexpected surprise. The team expected to find a doorway, then an entrance beneath it. Then they assumed there would be a stone door open it, and they could enter the tomb. "I never imagined it would be like this," one archaeologist said. Since the end gate was clearly a ceremonial portal, its pavilion should have marked the entrance to the underground palace. But when the full 7.3-meter high end gate was exposed, they discovered that the doorway at its base contained no wooden door at all. It was packed solid with stones. After careful examination, they realized these stones could not be removed. They simply couldn't be pulled out. Removing them would cause the entire end gate to collapse, because there was no large beam above the stone fill to support the structure. Although the end gate was beautifully constructed, the alarming flaw was that it lacked a spanning beam to hold up the upper tiers. "We had no idea what to do next," a team member admitted. This tomb structure had no stone door and no beam above the doorway, completely unlike typical tombs. Neither of the two previously excavated tombs had anything like this. From this, it became clear that the end gate of Tomb No. 1 in Cemetery Village was unlike any tomb entrance ever found before. Why was this structure so different? had the craftsmen been careless? And how could an end gate be built without a supporting beam? Faced with this unusual situation, the archaeological team held a collective discussion, eventually agreeing on one explanation. They concluded that the end gate had been constructed this way from the very beginning. The builders first erected pillars on both sides, then filled the space between them with stones rather than installing a beam as in typical architecture. In other words, the craftsmen intentionally sealed the doorway with stone during construction. This allowed them to continue building above it while also preventing tomb robbers from entering the underground palace through the gate. Anyone attempting to remove the stones without understanding the structure would trigger a collapse and likely lose their life. It was a sophisticated and deadly anti-theft mechanism, but this raised another question. If the doorway was sealed from the start, how did the craftsmen build the chambers behind it? And once the underground palace was complete, how was the noble woman supposed to be buried inside? For the moment, these questions had no answers, and they also created a major obstacle for the ongoing excavation. Since the main passage was unusable, the team had to find another way in. We can't enter from here, they realized. We must find another access point. So they began searching the area behind the end gate. They wondered whether there might be a gap or opening near the altar above the tomb because earlier drilling had revealed a vertical shaft. The team checked whether a similar gap existed between this shaft and the end gate. Behind the gate, after all, should lie the underground palace. The archaeologists now hoped that the Duanmen and the palace were not directly connected. After clearing the altar area, they found a space roughly 2 meters by 2 meters. It resembled a small patio or vertical shaft, and it appeared to be the only possible way down. Without this patio, the excavation might have been impossible. Tomb No. 2 might never have been reached, and the entire project could have ended right there. The team was determined to excavate the underground palace while preserving its structure completely as possible. That 4 square meter patio had now become their only hope of entering the tomb. The excavation of Tomb No. 1 in Cemetery Village had reached its most critical stage. Was the tomb's owner truly Li Meozhin's wife? If so, what kind of magnificent burial would a woman of queenly status have received?